They laughed at the Australians, but the jungle didn't. What began as mockery under the choking heat of Vietnam became one of the most brutal lessons in military survival ever learned. No field manual warned about it. No briefing covered it. No regulation prepared them for what was coming. These weren't just soldiers meeting on a forward post. They were two belief systems colliding. Shiny confidence versus scarred instinct. Doctrine versus adaptation. Order versus nature. And when the skies finally opened, only one truth remained standing. It wasn't the one the Americans believed in. Why did elite fighters deliberately destroy their own boots? What secret did they understand that others ignored? And why did that knowledge leave hardened men silent, knee-deep in mud? Stay to the end, because in the next few minutes, you'll witness how a single, shocking decision permanently rewrote the rules of jungle warfare. This is not a story about equipment. It's a story about survival, pride, and the moment rain decides who walks out alive. Vietnam. 1969. The heat shimmered above the forward base at Fork 2 as the afternoon sun sagged toward the tree line. Two worlds stood facing each other beneath the fading sky. Americans were immaculate, young, sharp, pressed uniforms clinging stiffly to their bodies. Boots polished to regulation shine. Helmets clean. Webbing aligned with parade ground precision. They leaned casually against sandbags, sipping instant coffee, laughing softly, confident in their system, confident in themselves. Then they saw them. 5 men from the Australian SAS emerged, from the dust like figures pulled from a different war. Faces streaked with grime. Eyes calm. Movements economical. Their boots were sliced open down to the ankles, leather torn apart and held together with canvas tape darkened by mud and sweat. To the Americans, it looked like insanity. Discipline was armor. Clean boots meant control. Regulation meant survival. Seeing government-issued footwear, deliberately mutilated, felt like watching a rulebook set on fire. 1. American officer smirked behind mirrored sunglasses. He knew the difference between order and chaos. Or so he thought. The Australians walked past, without a word, silent, unbothered, as if the jungle itself had already chosen its champions. For the Australians, every tier had purpose. For the Americans, it looked like surrender. The gap between them wasn't rank or nationality. It was philosophy. Doctrine versus instinct. Regulation versus raw survival. They didn't know it yet, but the real enemy wasn't human. It was wet. It was hidden. And it was already waiting. The air hung thick, heavy with rot and rust. Somewhere beyond the perimeter, the jungle whispered its first warning. Not loud, not clear, but absolute. And as laughter echoed across the sandbags, no one realized the punchline was already on its way. This wasn't boredom at a forward base. This was the first fracture in the myth of invincibility. And every drop of rain, gathering above, would pry it wider. Because in Vietnam, the real war often began at your feet. But that was only the first blow. The American recon team moved like a checklist brought to life. Every strap inspected, every pouch aligned. Jungle greens pressed stiff with starch. Boots laced tight, leather sealed, soles pristine. Each man looked like a walking manual, proof that order could conquer chaos. Lieutenant Clark believed in procedure. Control meant victory. Systems existed for a reason. Radios were tested 3 times. Maps sealed in plastic. Batteries double-packed. Socks fresh from the quartermaster still carried the sterile smell of factories half a world away. Rifles gleamed, mechanisms oiled, slings adjusted to exact regulation length. 10 points on the patrol checklist. Everyone ticked. Their gear wasn't just equipment. It was belief made tangible. Protection forged by industry. Confidence built by logistics, not experience. They trusted the system, because it had never failed them before. At least. Not yet. They respected the jungle in theory. Briefings, diagrams, lectures. But deep down, they believed it could be mastered like any machine. Tuned, controlled, optimized. The jungle was not a machine. It had no switches, no screws, no settings. Only patience. As humidity thickened and the light dimmed beneath the canopy, the Americans stood ready, spotless, confident, armed with technology, hierarchy, and human invention, convinced it could outthink nature itself. Manuals promised survival through method. Order equals victory. But soon, that order would rot under tropical rain. And every seal, every checklist, every polished rule would dissolve into the same red mud. Because in Vietnam, the jungle didn't care about systems. It only remembered those who bled. The Australians didn't march. They flowed. They moved through the jungle like smoke. Silent, fluid, inevitable. Their uniforms were sun-bleached and torn, sleeves rolled tight, fabric stained permanently with earth. No two looked alike. One carried a rifle so old its wooden stock had been replaced with a rough-cut plank. Another had wrapped his machete in cloth to stop even the faintest metallic click. Everything they owned was stripped down to purpose. Where the Americans looked like a catalog display, the Australians looked like survivors who had already paid the price. Twice, sweat fused their clothing to skin. Gear patched with local fabric. Webbing heavy with ammunition, but light of excess. No radios chirping. No glossy maps. Just eyes scanning, feet testing the ground, bodies reading terrain the way sailors read waves. The jungle seemed to recognize them. To outsiders, they appeared careless, even reckless. But this was discipline born from disaster. Precision disguised as chaos. Every ripped boot, every missing button, every scar told a story of mistakes, already paid for in blood. They didn't follow manuals. They followed terrain. Wisdom earned through rot, rain, and exhaustion. They called themselves field men. In truth, they were the jungle's own creation. When they paused, even the insects seemed to hesitate, as if the forest itself acknowledged its most dangerous inhabitants passing through. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. The mud spoke. The tape on their rifles spoke. The scars spoke. Each piece of gear was a page from a textbook no classroom had ever printed. And soon, those lessons would be learned the hard way. Very hard. The pause came beneath the swollen canopy just before the rain. Americans checked straps and recounted supplies. Australians crouched silently, cutting open ration tins with dulled knives. Between them stretched more than distance. It was the space between theory and instinct. Lieutenant Clark stared again at those boots. Leather sliced open, taped, soles worn thin. In his mind, it was vandalism, destruction of government property, heresy against discipline. But silence answered first. The Australians offered no explanation. They never did. One of them finally glanced up. His expression said everything. There. Our place's rules cannot breathe. Protection can become a trap. Sometimes, survival means undoing what was designed to save you. Better, a blade through leather than rot through flesh. Philosophy without speeches. Knowledge written in scars. The Americans called it chaos. The Australians called it Tuesday. And above them, rain was already gathering. The jungle changed without warning, not with thunder, not with lightning. With silence. The wind died. Insects vanished. The smell of wet iron rose from the soil. Then a single drop fell, heavy, deliberate. Another followed. Then dozens. Within minutes, the world drowned. Rain didn't arrive as weather. It arrived as judgment. Punched through the canopy, turned dust to sludge, erased footprints as fast as they formed. Radios hissed. Ponchos failed. Ink bled from maps. Boots filled. Weight doubled. Order dissolved. Leather ground skin raw. Mud sucked at every step. Discipline had no defense against saturation. The Australians moved ahead, boots draining, gear flexing, bodies surrendered to the rain rather than fighting it. To them. This was routine. To the Americans, it was collapse. Streams formed along the trail. Men slipped. Rifles clattered. Curses vanished beneath the roar. Pride eroded. By the first hour, American boots became traps, loaded, heavy, merciless. Blisters swelled. Toenails burned. Every step hurt more than the last. The jungle didn't attack. It waited. And then a man went down. The mud swallowed him to the waist. His boot tore half off as he struggled free. When they dragged him back, blood soaked through his sock, mixing with rain and clay. Silence fell. Even the rain seemed to lean closer. The lesson was complete.